Hey, welcome to Recovery 180. And today we got Micheal on, and Micheal has got a background in music and a very interesting story. So, welcome on board, Micheal.
Well, thanks for having me, Glenn. It's a pleasure to come and lift up Jesus.
Yeah, and so you're in the Vancouver area, is where you're coming from.
I'm actually in Langley, BC, which is in the Greater Vancouver district, I guess.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah,
Cool. So, just give us a little bit of a background on your upbringing and all that sort of stuff, and then slide us into how you got involved with the music industry.
for sure. Well, I was born in Burnaby, British Columbia, to a mom and a dad. I was the youngest of seven kids,
Hmm.
and I was actually 10 years after my brothers and sisters. In fact, one of my brothers used to joke around and say that I was the mistake. Little did he know that for many years that actually was in my subconscious. Literally, was the thing
Hmm.
that I always thought that I was a mistake, and never
Right.
really thought that I had a purpose and that I really was just a mistake. But anyways, yeah. So we had a beautiful family, a great life, a hardworking dad, a really devoted mom. She knew the Lord. She used to tell us a lot about the Lord
Hmm.
as a young child. Yeah, lived in the city. Just had great neighbors. Had a great white picket fence. Got a life, I would say.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
So you just said that your brother, I think you said, had mentioned that you were a mistake, and you said that that's something that kind of hung over your head for a while. Can you kind of
it
expand
did.
on
And
that?
it was meant as a joke. It was never meant to,
Hmm.
this is serious. It was just because, what it was is my mother had. I was 10 years after my last brother, and my mother had
Right.
been in a car accident, and she had been damaged internally, and so they didn't think that she could get pregnant. And then
Mm-hmm.
for me to pop up was a bit of a shock for everybody, and so that was where the mistake thing came from. But yeah, it did really kind of ride in the back of my mind, I guess. Never really noticed it till later in my addiction when I used to think I'm just a mistake, I'm just useless, I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't even be here, sort of thing. Yeah, so that was an issue with me,
So
and
how did your teenage years and all that stuff all roll out?
well, it kind of started my teenage years from the time I was 11. I started in my addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And how we got there basically was my father passed away. So we had that great life that I was telling you about
Mm-hmm.
until I made it to the age of 5, and he had a thing called an aortic dissection, which is where the artery splits and blood goes between the two layers, and you get an aneurysm, and it unfortunately ruptured,
Mm.
and he passed from that, and it just sent our family into a tailspin.
Yeah,
And
no
from
kidding.
that, there was a lot of issues and problems that began to arise. And so right after that, I turned to one of my brothers who was 2 years or two brothers ahead of me. He would have been because of the 10-year difference, he was almost 20, like 19. But he was born with a heart problem, and so he had a pacemaker put in at a very young age. And so he was always at home, and that's kind of why I turned to him as a kind of father figure or that male figure that I looked at.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the age of 8, unfortunately, he passed away in his sleep, and that was the heart condition. It stopped beating, and it was devastating to me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of where my anger towards God had began.
Mm.
My mom used to say that, oh, he's gone to be with the Lord, like she said with my father, and that
Mm-hmm.
Jesus
Mm-hmm.
loves us and he's going to take care of us. And in my mind, I thought, if he loved me, you wouldn't have taken my father, you wouldn't have
Yeah,
taken
that
my
didn't cut it
brother.
for you. That didn't cut it for you.
It didn't. It didn't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes we got to be careful how we are very explain to our children exactly what that means, and
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
it's not God taking them, but that these are the things of life that just happen.
Right. Right.
But as a child, I didn't see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, in that year, as 8 years old, there was a lot of things going on in my life. My mom had just gotten remarried to my stepfather, who was great before they got married, but after they got married, he began to abuse alcohol. Or he always was an alcoholic, but he just didn't really show it
Mm-hmm.
in that beginning phase of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it became. We also didn't know that he was borderline schizophrenic. So when he'd get drunk, he would just become like a monster, just a completely opposite person than he
Mm-hmm.
was when he was straight.
Mm-hmm.
Began beating me, my mother, verbally abusive, very psychopathy of it was extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And so also that year, so the age of 8 was really one of the hardest years I ever went through. Is I lost
Mm-hmm.
my brother. My stepfather turns out to be this way,
Mm-hmm.
and one of his extended family began to sexually molest me at that time.
Mm.
So it was happening a couple of times a week too. It wasn't
Mm.
like it was,
Mm-hmm.
not very frequent. It was fairly frequent.
Mm-hmm.
He watched me some of these times, and so that began just change in me completely. I just became very hard. Um, he, I didn't cry because he liked to see me crying, so I shut
Mm-hmm.
off crying. I shut off emotion, shut
Mm-hmm.
off all those things, all the anger and hatred I just kept inside,
Mm-hmm.
pain,
Mm-hmm.
anything. I would just never give you the satisfaction of knowing that you hurt me.
Right.
And so that went on until I was 11 when I discovered alcohol and drugs. So my brothers used to smoke weed, cigarettes. And so I started to, pinch a little here and there, steal a little weed, steal a
Mm-hmm.
couple of smokes, and take it with my friends. And we go down to the gully and smoke it and hang out. And I just noticed that this was a thing that was a way for me to escape some of the feelings that I was thinking and feeling at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just
Mm-hmm.
forget about my life when I had to go back home. Things would go back to the way it were. So
Mm-hmm.
it was my little escapism to go down to the ravine and to go smoke weed or to drink or do whatever we did. And that went on until I was 13 when finally I grabbed a butcher knife actually from my kitchen. And when my abuser came to abuse me, I pulled it out and I said I was going to kill him if he ever laid hands on me again, which ended the sexual abuse at that moment in time in my life. But
Mm-hmm.
it also started a time in my life where I just became very hate filled and wanted to, execute justice on anybody that I thought was a pedophile, including
Yeah,
him and
that's, I
others.
was just wondering, like, so that was that a turning point to where all of a sudden you just felt that I'm going to take charge and I'm going to protect myself
Yes,
and those around me if
exactly.
I need to.
That's a great way of putting it. I
Yeah.
think I created this outer monster or this outer scary guy in order to protect this broken child that was on the
Mm-hmm.
inside.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, again, the self medication became more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So from the time I was 13, I was the kind of the kid that your parents told you to stay away from, that most
Mm-hmm.
parents didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to have
Mm-hmm.
around. And that was stigmatizing too, because, you want to be accepted, but everybody's kind of shunning you. And then I started to, I was into music. The thing that I ran away from was drugs and music were the two things I got. So I'd sit in my room and I'd listen to Black Sabbath and Zeppelin and all these bands. And I was just started to get into Iron Maiden and then into deeper and darker music. And from that, I got into Slayer and to Venom and, satanic music and began
So
to
the
get
so the
into,
music was the music that you were choosing was symbolic of how you were feeling and the lifestyle that you were on.
yes, exactly. I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted, I loved horror movies. I loved heavy music. I love satanic stuff, anything that was witchcraft, all of that kind of stuff just started to draw me in for two reasons. Number one, it really upset my mom, and I was angry at my mom, even though it wasn't her fault. She
Mm-hmm.
never knew that I was being abused, by the way. I never did tell her.
Mm.
But I just thought in my head, you should have done something. I was
Right.
blaming her just as I blamed God, right?
Yeah.
And so we
Yeah.
went through that struggle for quite some time. There was a great divide between the two of us. And so in my bedroom, I began to literally worship the devil through music. I'd literally sing "Praise Hail Satan," like
Mm-hmm.
lyrics from songs,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and as Satan came to Jesus and said, "If you bow down and worship me, I'll give you all of these things." It didn't take very long before I was bowed down and worshiping him before things started to open up for me in music. So
Right.
music
Right.
was my life. It was everything for me. Like it was my medicine. It was everything. And so at 15, I found out that my sister got married and her husband was adopted and he wanted to find his adopted family.
Mm.
So he went to back east to finally go meet them. And it turns out that his family was their son, his brother, was Alex Lifeson, the guitar player for Rush. And so I thought, wow, this is amazing. I loved Rush at the time too; it was one
Mm-hmm.
of my favorite bands, and so I got to go backstage and meet the band. And when I got back there and I saw everything, I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do. I
Mm-hmm.
want to, watching all these guys setting up all the equipment and everything. And so I mentioned to their stage manager, I said, I'd love to do this. Where do I sign up? He's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
you're 15, dude. We can't really take you on at this point.
Yeah.
But he said, but
Yeah.
when you get older, like when you
Yeah.
when you're 19 or something, there's a company called NASCO here in Vancouver. You just give them a call and we'll
So were
put it on.
you working on your musical skills at that point,
Yeah,
guitar
so
playing and all
my
that?
mom had bought me a guitar when I was 14, and that's where I got started playing thrash metal. So I was into
Mm.
thrash, Metallica, Slayer, all these bands,
So you came
and
with some confidence then that you felt that you could play at that level because
yeah,
you'd
yeah,
been
yeah,
working on it
and
for quite
so
a while. Yeah.
exactly, and so at that point when I left, that's 15. until I got to the 19. I couldn't wait to get to 19. It was
Yeah.
just so I could work in this business, right?
Yeah.
In that time, I spent most of my time, listening to stuff, trying to learn how to play it,
Hmm.
knowing how to, buying equipment, learning how to set it up, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
So then when 19 came, I started actually working in a bar called Studebaker's Cabaret. Actually started going to that bar. Sorry, I'll get a little ahead of myself. Started going to that bar and started to really get into the bar and the nightclub scene and the music scene there. And I knew a lot of bands. I know Chad Kroger from Nickelback. I met him in those days when they were still a small bar band playing at my bar, and I used to set up their equipment for them and
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff. So I'm into the the age where um, I'm able to do the working in the shows, so I started doing them in the bars. And
Hmm.
then I met a few guys that were working for this company called NASCO, and they said, "Hey, dude, you should be working in the big shows instead of just working these little bar shows and stuff." And I
Hmm.
said, "Well, hey, that sounds cool. I wouldn't mind trying that, right?" So I actually worked, I think, for Ronnie James Dio at Studebakers, and one of the guys gave me this number to give a call. So I called it, and they said, "Sure, come on in. We'll give you a try." Started working off in the trucks originally, just loading equipment, taking equipment in and out of the trucks on the docks.
Hmm.
And they quickly found that I knew what the equipment was and everything was. And so I got graduated up to a stagehand and started working as a stagehand. So now here I am. It's just like it said, bow down and worship me, and I'll give you all these things. I went
Hmm.
from out of the truck onto the stage. And now I'm working in these big festivals. I'm working around some of the biggest bands in the world. And
Hmm.
my guitar heroes are all here. And, everything that I'd ever dreamed of is here. And my addiction was also getting extremely bad by this point, the cocaine and
So
speed. I was
yeah, I was
on
wondering what was the lifestyle like that you were working around in that
sex,
time.
drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, it's cliche, but it's 100% what it is. It's
Hmm.
strictly that's all it is. It's just
Hmm.
a party, nonstop. Considering, but I mean, there's all work in that time. But
You're
after
getting
the
the work
work
done,
is
but
done,
you're high at the same time.
you're high the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would sometimes be up for 2 or 3. And in that business, you're up for 2 or 3 days.
Right.
Especially in the festival business, you're up for maybe 2 days. Like when I did Ozfest, I was up for 2.5 days one time, where I didn't go to sleep at all, and I was,
Mm-hmm.
pretty wired on cocaine
Hmm.
and speed at the time. Yeah, so that was kind of the lifestyle that I was living. It was, breakneck speed, show after show after show, GM place, a BC place, working all the Commodore, working the bar. I was working the booze can after that. Just in that lifestyle of just drugs, alcohol, rock and roll,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
these women, and that was pretty much my lifestyle for that time in my life. Then I met a girl. I started dating her. We ended up having a child together. We were codependent drug addicts, so that didn't work out well, and we split up. And she took our child, my daughter. Her name is Shalane. They took her, and that just destroyed me. And that really sent me into
Hmm.
addiction, not just the party type of addiction, but the kind of behind the closed door, smoking crack, smoking meth, just trying to heal brokenness with something
Right.
that doesn't
Right.
heal brokenness, right? And so I really struggled with alcohol and drugs at that point. And it was a couple of years later, I think it was 1997, while working at the bar, a girl came in, kind of talked with me, and was really attracted to her. Something about her I really liked. And sure, I didn't know this, but she was a Christian, and she was a little bit backslidden, we'll say, at that time. But she knew the Lord. And there was something about her that just always brought peace whenever I was around her, right? And so we started a relationship. She was really good at helping me when I had my daughter because I wasn't able to really do great on my own. My daughter was still only a couple of years old, 3 years old at the time. And so through that, she decided that she thought I needed to go to church. So she said, Mom, we think we should take you to a church service, right? And I was like, I'm not going to go to your Christian church. I don't believe in your God. I'm basically angry. I don't believe in any of this Jesus stuff. I'm just done with any of that kind of stuff. I said,
Hmm.
and actually, I'll start on fire if I walk into a church, is actually what I said to her, right? That was my joke, right? So she took it seriously. And so she found out that they were going to do a church in the park, right, in Queens Park in New Westminster. And there was going to be a pastor who was going to be speaking. She thought his testimony would really bless me, right?
Hmm.
So I thought to myself, my thinking, I'm like, I'll kill two birds with one stone. I'll go and get my mom. I'll take her too, and I'll prove to both of them that their Christianity don't work.
Yeah.
And I'll
Yeah.
show up, right? And I won't start on fire because it's not a church, and I'll be okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went to this park and I heard this testimony. And while I'm sitting there, he's telling about how he'd been delivered from drugs and alcohol. And now he's got my attention because
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want. I want to be a dad for my daughter. I want to be a good son for my mom. Both of them deserved it, but I couldn't do it on my own. I was just a
Mm-hmm.
mess. But he's telling me this story, and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And then he gets to the end, and I'm like, well, it's Jesus. And I was like, oh, why does it always got to be this Jesus? I just can't take it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to have anything to do with it, right? So I left that park that day, not knowing that a seed had been planted in my heart, but knowing something had changed. It changed
Mm-hmm.
my outlook on things and
Mm-hmm.
made me a little bit more open to spirituality. So
Mm-hmm.
then I started checking out other religions and everything from ufology to Buddhism to you name it. I was all over the place just because I was looking for what he had, but without the Jesus part.
Mm-hmm.
And then my life went totally out of control. My addiction got out of control. I ended up losing my job in the bar. Losing my job in the music business. They told me to take a 5-month hiatus. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when everything kind of spiraled out of control. And then I got back into working again. I was working shows. And then I got a big show. I worked OZFest in 99. And that was Black Sabbath getting back together, which was a huge thing for me. They were my favorite band of all time, right? 25-year reunion. It was OZZY, Slayer, everybody, and I've worked with OZZY a few times, a few
So
other
what
Ozfests.
was your role with those bands when you were on the road?
Stagehand. So my
Mm-hmm.
job was to basically take once everything was loaded off the trucks and up to the stage, we'd take everything out of the travel cases and then
Mm-hmm.
set up, and we'd bring it over to each station, and then they
Right.
would set up monitors, whatever it happened to be. We'd bring out the line arrays, which are the speakers that come down, and those,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we'd lock those all together, and then they'd hoist them up to the riggers who would take everything up into the stage. We set up some of the biggest stage actually at that time of all time, which was the Ozfest touring stage in Thunderbird Arena back in 1999. So, anyways, I came home from that show
Yeah.
to find that my girlfriend, who was a practicing witch, Satanist, alcoholic, drug addict, had
Mm-hmm.
left me a note saying that I was too messed up and that she was leaving me. And if that doesn't give you a kind of a time to reassess your life
Mm-hmm.
moment, then I don't know what does. And
And
exactly what
you
happened.
knew that she was pretty messed up too.
Oh, she was really messed up. Yeah. And if
Yeah.
she's leaving me because I'm that messed up,
Yeah.
then you probably should reassess where you're at.
Yeah.
And which
Exactly.
I did. And at that moment, I just decided that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was
Mm-hmm.
sick and tired of the roller coaster life of drug addiction and everything that I was doing. And even though, I had lots of money, still had all those things. I didn't have peace. I had this hole in my heart thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was at this point doing meth, crack, heroin, weed, alcohol, smoking 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes a day. It was,
Mm-hmm.
completely out of control. Just couldn't stuff enough stuff in there. And so I went out in my backyard and I decided I was going to take my life that night. And so I decided to have an argument with God before I did because I did believe my mom when she said God was real. And I was just so mad at him that I thought I would have an argument. And so I shook my fist at the sky and I said, I tried everything in this life and nothing's worked. And as soon as I stopped talking for 1 second, it was like a vacuum in my backyard. It just got instantly quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a thought that was my own say, you never tried me. And I thought, what? Who's me? And then all of a sudden, all I can explain is a revelation moment, an epiphany, whatever you want to call it. Light bulb went on. And at that exact moment, I realized it's the Lord, it's Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
This is real. This is the one thing that I thought was nonsense was actually real. And all the things I thought were real just became absolute nonsense at that exact moment. It just went 180, like I love this name of your podcast, a
Mm-hmm.
180 flip in my thinking, just. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, and I called out and I said, God, if you're real, I need you right now. Because if you don't show up, I'm going to take my life. I don't want to live this life anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
then I had a supernatural experience where the Lord just came upon me and I began crying and weeping, and my shirt was like soaked halfway down my chest. And I was just completely, I don't know if the word to look for, emptied out of all that pain, all that anger, all that stuff I would never let out, all those tears. That's why it wasn't even
So you cried then
symbolic.
finally after all those years. You finally cried.
I did
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I was just going to say it's almost symbolic in the sense that my shirt was halfway soaked when I went into the bathroom and I looked at myself. I was
Mm-hmm.
wearing a gray T-shirt and I halfway down soaked. I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
I was obviously snotty and swollen up, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just looked at myself differently. I thought, who is this person I'm looking at? But I literally, I felt the Holy Spirit come into me, and I even called my mom, and I just had a new computer, and computers were fairly new, and
Mm-hmm.
around 5 years. And I said, "It feels like something downloaded in me." And she said, she
Yep.
started crying. First, she didn't even recognize my voice when I called, and
Mm-hmm.
then when she realized it was me, she started weeping, probably as bad as I was. And then when we finally all got it both together, and we were talking, she said, "That was the Holy Spirit into you, right?" And
Mm-hmm.
it made sense to me when she said it. Though normally that would sound like absolute craziness. Beforehand, it just totally made sense. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
So you
And
you
so
knew you knew at that moment something happened. Something
I did.
changed
Oh
in
yeah,
you.
no, it was
Yeah.
night and day kind of thing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was totally. I can't even explain it. It's, to this day, I have a hard time explaining it, and I've seen it happen to other people too. I've been in the presence of it, and still can't explain it completely.
So you talked to your mom about it. Did you talk to anybody else then about it, or at that point, or?
My best friend actually showed up about 2 hours later because he used to come by every morning. And we used to smoke a joint because I would be going to bed and he would be heading off to work. And so we'd smoke a joint before he left.
Yeah.
So he showed up to smoke the joint, and I came out with a little cardboard box with all of my drugs and paraphernalia in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I handed it to him immediately. I said, "You got to get this out of my house." And he's looking at me. He looks inside. He gets a smile on his face because it's like full of dope, right? And he's
Yeah.
like, "Well, cool, dude. Well, what's going on, right? Cops coming or something?" Like he was freaking out. And then he
Mm-hmm.
looks at me. He goes, "Dude, you look different." Because I was still, obviously I've been crying and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
there was a change, obviously, that
Mm-hmm.
even he
Mm-hmm.
noticed. And he said to me, "Dude, what happened?" I said, "I found Jesus," like he was lost. I said, "I found Jesus in my backyard." And, and he had a Catholic upbringing. When I used to mock Christians, he used to always move away from me. And I go, "What are you doing that for?" He says, "So I think that you're going to get hit by lightning and I don't want to be standing beside you when it happens," sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he was the first person to see the change. And I didn't even notice, probably for about 3 or 4 days. I didn't have any cravings. I never had a craving for any dope, any cigarettes. That's crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
completely
Mm-hmm.
took it away supernaturally. And I know that he needed to do that because I needed to have that experience because I was a
Mm-hmm.
very, like, you got to show me and I got to really
Yeah.
believe this.
Yeah.
So he left me no other explanation as to how this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that was where I was at. I was like, wow, this is a life changing moment. I knew my life had changed. Now, don't get me wrong. I still, later on, we had some issues. And not too long after that, my mom bought me a Bible. She said, "You need to find a church." I found a church, went there for almost a couple of years. And then, well, I was reading my Bible and going to this church. I was like, this church doesn't seem like my Bible. And then find out that they're Unitarians and that they
Mm-hmm.
are actually kind of a new age kind of
Mm-hmm.
church. They talk about
Mm-hmm.
Christ Spirit, but they never talk about Jesus. As soon as I brought his name up in this place, they turned on me, we'll say. And so I
Mm-hmm.
went home that night just bawling my eyes out
Mm-hmm.
and didn't know what to do. And so I got on the side of my bed and I prayed and I just said, "Father, I just don't know what to do. I'm in the wrong place. I need to be in the right place. And can you guide me?" Right.
Mm-hmm.
And literally the next day I got up and I went to work. And one of my coworkers came up to me and said, "This is going to sound real weird, Mike, but I feel like God just asked me to come to church, to my church with you on the weekend." And I looked at him strange. He's like, "Oh, no, no, don't worry about it, dude. Forget it." And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"No, I prayed about this last night." And then he looks at me, and goes, "You pray?"
Yeah.
I thought you
Yeah.
were like a Satanist or something, dude. And I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
"Well, I used to be, but I still had the long hair and everything. I still looked the role, but
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
given my life to Christ, right?" And so I said, "Sure, I'll come." And so I went with him, and I was at Willington Church in Burnaby was my first church, and
Mm-hmm.
started going there. And I think it was going great for a while. And then one day I went out for breakfast with my daughter, and we decided to go to a restaurant in New West called the Big Six. And I had my food, and afterwards I had a craving for a cigarette, which was really like stronger than I ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I was going to go next door and buy a cigar and smoke that, and it would make me green. I wouldn't want to smoke. And so my daughter, she was 5. She has her arms crossed, and she's just so mad because she sees me with this cigar, and she's like, "Nope, you're not going to do it, Dad." And out of the mouth of babes, she
Mm-hmm.
says, "Satan's just trying to get you back." And I was like, even that, I didn't listen. I stuck the
Mm-hmm.
pig in my mouth. I went to go light it, and I looked up, and on the restaurant, right beside the restaurant that I was in, it was an old Chinese restaurant. It had been converted into like an office. There's a big sign that says "Jesus is Lord" right above it.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally opened my mouth, and the cigar fell out on the ground. I stomped on it. My daughter looked over. She says, "What did it say, Dad?" I said, "Jesus is Lord. We got to go there." I'm like, "No, we got to go home." "No, we're going there." And so she took me in there, and it was called the House of the Good Shepherd. It had a little shepherd out front and some sheep. And I walked in, and I talked to the guy that ran the place, and I shared my testimony with him. He goes, "Wow, what a testimony, bro. You got to come back and tell the pastor here. He'd be
Mm-hmm.
so blessed to hear that testimony," right? And I said, "Oh, sure, I'll come back." And then I didn't. I went on back with my life. And so I did go to Bible study, and I told everybody no, I went to work actually, sorry. And I told my friend about it. He said, well, you should come to Bible study, right? And I said, okay, I'll try it out, right? So we went to Bible study. And from the Bible study, we were on the subject of baptism. He said, well, it says that you need to be baptized. And I hadn't been baptized yet. So I thought, oh, well, I haven't been baptized. And they said, oh, okay, well, here's a pamphlet about baptism. Well, but you read the pamphlet, and we'll work it out with the pastor, and we'll get you baptized. So I said, well, sounds good to me. Great. So I grabbed the pamphlet. I left. On my way home, I'm working graveyard shift, and I'm going to 7-Eleven to get myself a coffee. And as I walk into 10th and 12th in New Westminster, this man opens the door for me. And I look at him. He's a biker, and I used to work in the booze can, so I thought maybe I knew him from the booze can because he's very familiar. He's a really big smile on his face. He opens the door for me, and he gives me a nod. And as soon as he does, John the Baptist comes to my mind, just like a thought right out of nowhere. John the Baptist. I think that's the weirdest thought ever. And so, anyways, I just kind of read it off, and I looked out over the plate glass window, watch him walk away. He looked at eye contact again. John the Baptist again. Okay, get my coffee, get my car, go home. Next week, we go. I'm at work. I'm looking at this pamphlet. Every time I read about the baptism, I see this guy opening the door at the 7-Eleven. I think he's John the Baptist. And somehow I'm equating all of this together. And I think this is really weird. So I decided to tell them at the Bible study the next week what had happened. And everybody kind of side-eyed me like, okay, John the Baptist, okay. And I said, but the strangest thing is I think this guy might be the guy that's supposed to baptize me. Now it's starting to sound real weird. Even I'm thinking maybe it's this drug psychosis or something that's kicking in, right? So we go through the thing. They prayed and said, well, Michael, God will show you either way, which way it is, right? So I left there and I went back to the same 7-Eleven the next week and went bought my coffee. I waited for that John the Baptist to show up, and he never did. So I left there and I went home and turned on my TV, and I'm getting ready for work. I'm shaving in the bathroom, and I hear the TV's on. I hear 100 Huntley Street come on. My mom used to watch it when I was a kid. And so here I am, 100 Huntley Street's on, and they say, coming up next is a pastor. Him and his wife just came back from a trip from India. They have a ministry called the House of Good Shepherd in New Westminster. And I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. And the camera pans over, and guess what? John the Baptist is sitting on the couch with his wife. The guy that I thought was John the Baptist is actually a pastor, but now he's in a 3-piece suit, not a Dayton's and a leather vest. Yeah. And my jaw hit the ground, and I just started weeping. I don't know what was going on. So again, first thing I did, call my mom, said, what's going on? She's like, Michael, this is not normal. You need to go and see that man. And I didn't go right away. I should have, right? But things came up. And then my brother, who was also an addict, he had gone to Alberta to get away from addiction. Obviously, that didn't work. He ended up coming back, was downtown. My mom sent me down there to find him. 1:00 in the morning on a Sunday night, I'm downtown looking for my brother, and I felt the Lord speak to me. And as I'm looking at all these broken people and thinking, you can help me to help them, is what I'm feeling. The Lord
This
speaking
is like Hastings, like downtown Vancouver?
Right on the right on the corner. My brother lived for 10 years in the back alley of Main and Hastings, behind Carnegie. Literally, he had no home. He lived in that alley. So I knew the area well, and I also had done time down there myself. So, anyways, I found him. I took him home. We prayed, and then on my way home, I just started praying. I said, Lord, save my brother from addiction like you did me, please. And I said, and I don't know where to start, but I want to help these other people down there too, Lord. And then all of a sudden I had a vision of that guy I saw on TV whose church I was at. And then it makes me realize that's the guy's testimony I heard in the park. It's the same guy. That's the guy, right? So it was actually him who had shared the testimony that planted the seed in the whole 9 yards. So here I am. I decided that next day I was going to go to his ministry and talk to him. And I got there, and it was like, in the evening, and he said, I'd love to hear your testimony. He said, but we're on our way out to minister to the people who are drug addicted in Surrey at the front room shelter in Surrey. How about you come out and share that testimony, and I'll be able to hear it too, and our friends in the street and our addicted friends will be able to hear it. And so here, God's already answered my prayer, like less than 24 hours, 12 hours later. I don't know where to start. I'm starting. I'm on my way out to do this. It was just amazing. And so I got there and I shared my testimony.
We have about 2 to 3 minutes left before we run out of time. So if you
Okay.
could just.
So I shared my testimony out there. It was meant for this one guy who was there. He began weeping. I went over. I got the pastor to come over. We led him to Christ. He ended up coming back with us. His name is David. Him and I have now worked hand in hand doing street ministry every Monday night. From that night, I pretty probably missed, not very many Monday nights in the last 20 some odd years,
And
22,
that's with
23.
night shift, the street
No, it
ministry.
wasn't night shift yet. This was House
Oh,
of the Good Shepherd, but night shift was formed about 2 years later. That was
mm,
2002. 2004 night shift started. My
okay.
pastor actually knows Mac very well, and so
Hmm.
we were working with them, trading meat and bread back and forth between our two ministries until our ministry moved up to Squamish, and then I joined the night shift. So around 2010, I
Mm,
joined
mm,
night shift full time,
mm,
and 2011 I was badged, I guess you would call it. Back
mhm,
that's when they
mhm.
brought the badge system in, and so I've been with night shift ever since. And that David, that the one that I led to Christ, him and I worked side by side for the last 22 years. So God is so
Cool.
good that yeah,
So
He's
you're,
kept
yeah,
us
so
together.
you're now doing ministry, you're doing street, you're singing, doing music as people are doing outreach.
Yes.
Did
So
you ever think you would ever see yourself in that
oh,
spot doing that sort of thing after all those
absolutely
years and
not.
all of
Are
that?
you kidding me? If you'd have told me when I was 20 or 21 that I wouldn't be playing metal, and I wouldn't be on in some really touring band, and that I'd be
Mm,
a worship leader at a church, and I've been a worship leader pretty much since I became a Christian.
mm.
First in the street, then in the church for 12 or 13 years. I was the head worship leader at my church. Um,
So if you had a challenge, as we just got a few minute and a half, whatever,
yeah.
just throw out a challenge to somebody that's out there that might have maybe walked in the shoes that you walked in. I mean, you've had so much
Well, I
trauma,
would
so much
say
change.
I would say that try like I share this in the street when I'm out there. I said I always pray that God would reveal Himself, and
Mhm.
I say after you've heard what I've shared with you, why don't you just have a little prayer and say, God, can you reveal yourself to me like you did to that man, so that
Mhm.
that my
Mhm.
life could be changed as well. So my sobriety has been staying in the church, being around other people that have been set free.
Mhm.
Helping others in night shift and stuff is another thing that helps me to keep my sobriety.
Mhm.
Obviously, prayer and the word has transformed and changed my life completely, as well as
Mhm.
worship. But I would say to anybody, give God a try. Just say, God, if you're real, can you show yourself to me now? That's exactly what I said in my backyard. I can't
Mhm.
tell you how many testimonies I've heard exact words. God, if
Mhm.
you're real, I need you right now. I've heard
Yeah.
that so many times. If I had a dollar for every time I could buy a house, seriously,
Great.
it's
Great.
amazing. It's the
Yeah.
smallest little statement. God is the biggest God in the universe. He is the God who
Well, and
created all things. And if
yeah,
he can do that, he can
unfortunately,
do anything.
yeah. I mean, you got a whole lot more story, but I'm watching our time clicking down here.
No, fair enough. I understand.
But
Yeah,
I think
it's
that's
hard to break
really,
it down into a
yeah,
small
really
time.
good challenge for people is that if they want to know more about God, ask him, reach out to him. He's there waiting right for us and stuff. So
Yes, and
thank you, Michael. If people want to get to know you, you're out with night shift doing stuff like that, and you're involved in a lot of stuff. And so thank you
yeah, I
very
go to
much
Recovery
for.
Church at CLA on Sunday evenings as well. So if anyone wants to come over and give me
Yep.
ask me some questions, I'm available all the time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being our guest on Recovery 180. That was great. Yeah, I'm sorry to have to crunch your story time wise and that, but it was
No,
great.
that's
And
not a problem at all, brother. You
yeah,
know
and
what?
maybe
God can
somewhere down
take
the
a
road,
little thing and make
we
it
might
into
have to do a
something
part
awesome.
two. We might have to do a part two somewhere
Maybe at
after
some
that.
point we can go into all the surgeries and stuff that God's carried me through
Yeah,
too.
there you go. There you go. All right. Thank you. Have a great day. And thanks for sharing your story. I know it's going to touch the hearts of many people. And I look forward to bumping into you at Recovery Church in various places. So thank
Amen,
you
brother.
again. God bless you.
My
Have a
pleasure.
great day.